Hi, thanks for being a part of this next module of the Ruach series of spiritual development. This module is called How to Read the Bible in a Way that it Makes Sense. As a therapist, the reason I find the Bible such an important topic to talk about is as people come into therapy and counseling, they're coming to get help to contend and deal with different difficulties, if that's depression and sadness or anxiety or some kind of relational conflict. Sometimes it's even a spiritual crisis people might be in, or a life transition. When addressing our problems, and as believers addressing problems, what often will come up is, why do we believe what we believe? How do we have God involved? And where do we find hope and understanding through all of our difficulties? And as we peel down the layers of what we believe, what comes up is, well, I believe that because it's out of the Bible, right? And so we then have to look at, well, then where did that come from in the Bible? And how are you seeing that as an accurate message or an accurate interpretation or application? And so it becomes very foundational of what we believe. That becomes foundational how we think and feel and go about our life, all because of how we read this book. It says everything there might be to know about life. The Bible is a very controversial book. It brings order from chaos, and it can be chaotic things that become back in order. I mean, the Bible brings all that. Ultimately, the Bible is here to bring order from chaos. So, as a therapist, I find it very important to come to some ways of understanding how to approach it. I've heard it and done the research regarding people's position currently about the Bible. In our culture, it's seemingly moving in a trend away from being an authority kind of document to just another book for some, because we have a hard time as a culture with ancient texts, it being the ultimate truth. And we also live in a culture right now, in a day and time, where people aren't comfortable with truth being outside of themselves. We want to have our own truth, and that's difficult when you're trying to contend with God, I think. And so that's a driving force in our culture that's making the Bible more frustrating to hold on to and to read. But more what I hear when I talk to people individually is they get frustrated with the Bible because you read it and go, I don't know what it means. Or where do I start? Why would this, and how does it apply to me at all? And so those are real frustrations. And so what becomes so foundational in our life now becomes a frustrating thing that we put on a shelf, put on the nightstand, and it sits there. But this is a book that changed time and has defined time and history. And it's here for us to use as a place to find hope and faith, instruction and understanding. But it deserves to be treated with some wisdom. And so what I wanted to kind of provide today and point out here in reading the Bible is this. I'm going to give you some things you can ask yourself so you know how to start. Okay? And then as you read the material, it'll give you more details and explanation. But as an overview, here are some questions to start out with. One, how do you learn? Do you learn by listening? Are you more auditory driven? And that's how you really understand versus reading? I know for some of us, we read a few pages or a chapter in the Bible and go, I got to read that four or five more times, then I'll finally get it. Maybe that's not how you really digest information. If that's the case, you can get the Bible on many different kind of apps. The YouVersion is a great one because it'll give you every version of the Bible possible. You can listen to it auditorily. So go do that if that's how you learn. Maybe you're the kind of person who learns through images and visuals. If that's the case, when you're reading it, whatever you read, put it down and then visualize in story, in a kind of a visualization way, the images that you just read. Maybe that's how it works for you. And some of us are very analytical and like to take every verse and dissect the words and the construct and the structure of the chapter. You want to know the Greek or the Hebrew and the historical background? Fantastic. And there are materials for you to go and get for that. And some of us are action people. I want to read it and then now do it. Great. Just be careful of which part you want to apply. But you might have to think about ways you can apply it to your life because you're an action person. Super. Just know what kind of learner you are. Okay? Next. Here's some basic structure in approaching the Bible. This document, again, covers a few thousand years. And it's just because it's historical, it's figurative, it's metaphorical. The Bible has many different kinds of literature in it. It's creationism, poetry. There are actual accounts. It's the Gospels, for example, are 4 accounts of the life of Christ. And in that you have parables, you have conversations, and you have historical accounts of things going on. That some of it is very literal, and some of it's not literal. And that's where people have a problem with the Bible, that it's not always literal. Because it's not always literal, doesn't necessarily take away its legitimacy or its authority. It's many different ways in describing God's story. It's one big story about order and chaos and redemption and grace. It's a story. And we get to be a piece of it. And so just know those kind of things, that this is a very complex book that demands careful attention. It calls itself a two-edged sword. People take a sword sometimes and play with it like it's a toy and hurt people with it. We take toys and we go after people with it, and that's not what the Bible is for. It is to be a very careful instrument for it to impact our lives and point us in the right direction. So when we pick this up, I want you to ask these basic questions. Who is writing that particular passage? Who's writing that letter? That's important to know, because who's writing it is going to affect the meaning and the interpretation, because we're all trying to interpret this book. Who is it written to? Is it a group of particular audience? Like, is it a very pure Jewish audience with Jewish type instruction? Or is it a letter that's written to a Gentile audience? I mean, who is it writing it? Who is it written to? And when was it written? If it's written in the before Christ in the Old Testament, that's going to affect the message and the meaning. Was it written before the cross? After the cross? When is very important, because that will change and how you might interpret it. Here's the major principle from all this. All the Bible and all the Scripture is for us to understand God and who we are. But not all Scripture is written to us specifically. You see lots of the Word in the Scripture written to a nation, for instance, or a person. Or it's written to a group of people, specifically. And that's important to understand, because that will shape the doctrine of how you order one's life. That's what some of us are trying to do, is how to pick this Bible to affect my order of life. Some of the Scripture is actually written to people like us today, Gentile-type believers. It's important to find out who that is. That's always written through Pauline Scripture. So who's writing it, and who's it written to, and when is a structure for us to kind of approach the Word with. And everything is there for us to understand the whole story of God. So those are some basic outline principles I want to share in this introductory video. And when you get into the actual literature here, it's going to get into very specific details about the Bible and how it kind of works. So don't be afraid, be encouraged, don't be frustrated, and pick up your word and start reading it in a way that it makes sense. Thanks.